probably need a dip rather than Feminism is a political practice of fighting male supremacy on behalf of women as a class, including all the women you don't like, including all the women you don't want to be around, including all the women who used to be your best friends, whom you don't want anything to do with anymore. It doesn't matter who the individual women are. Andrea Dworkin. On average, the police in England and Wales receive over 100 calls relating to domestic abuse every hour. In Britain, a woman is killed by a violent partner every 3 days. It is estimated that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence at some time in their lives. A woman is assaulted on average of 35 times before she seeks help. We all tell ourselves stories. In our stories, sometimes we're strong, sometimes we're weak. Sometimes we are the authors of our own destinies, and sometimes we are subjected to the will of others. Our stories don't always reflect reality, but they do help shape it. 86 days ago, my story changed forever. 87 days ago, my story was this. I was happy. I was safe. I was married to a good man. We had happy children, and I was protected from the worst of misogyny due to my privileged status as a white woman with a healthy family income. I was surrounded by a supportive network of family, friends, and acquaintances. My life was secure. Merely a day later, that entire story fell apart when my husband attacked me for the first and last time. I hesitate to tell the full details, knowing with surety that many of us have experienced the same, and how upsetting it is to be reminded of our own traumas. It could have been worse. I only had 1 small bruise on my chin, and although my jaw still hurts, the pain is fading at last. In many ways, I have been very lucky. My abuser admitted his guilt and was immediately charged. I am safe. I remain in the family home, and my children are protected by many wise professionals. I have been the so-called perfect victim, doing everything necessary to keep me and my children safe. It has been the most painful, horrendous experience of my life, and the aftershocks will be felt for years to come. Despite doing everything right, I have been subjected to disgusting victim blaming and Darvo tactics by my so-called support network. I have had to jettison nearly everyone in my day-to-day life who I thought I could depend upon. I have begun to recognize how abusive patterns of behavior are replicated throughout many of my relationships, and this has been incredibly difficult and uncomfortable to face up to. A woman is assaulted on average of 35 times before she seeks help, and now I know why. The lack of support from family, friends, and greater society is a huge burden placed on a victimized woman. My abuser had nearly 20 years to hurt me. He constantly tried to make me small. The drip, drip, drip of coercive control is a torture that is difficult to describe to someone who doesn't already understand. When he finally decided that his verbal assaults weren't enough to keep me down and used physical force to hurt me, he had everyone around us convinced we were a happy family, we had a solid marriage, and that he was a good man. The story I told myself was very believable to everyone around us. I still had my phone in my hand when he walked away from the destruction he caused, threatening to do it again as he went down the stairs. I rang the police as soon as he was out of my sight, adrenaline and shock dulling my thoughts and slowing my replies. My children huddled in my 5-year-old's box bedroom, listening as I described the incident. The world shifted during those moments. Our lives forever altered. Our story changed irrevocably. I didn't know how strong I would have to be in the days ahead. At first, I was worried for him. Did he have a mental breakdown of some kind? Was his health issue causing some sort of imbalance in his brain? Why would he do such a thing? Why? Clarity came quickly once the shock began to wear off, and I realized I had 2 options. I could remain living with someone who proved himself capable of extreme violence, or I could leave him forever. I chose to leave. But our friends, our family, our community, they didn't have the same experience as me. They didn't see his face. They didn't hear his voice. They didn't have a bruise. Their story remained the same, and they couldn't quite believe me. They thought I was overreacting. They thought I was too angry. They thought I was too emotional. I was and am none of those things. Why am I telling you my story? Why do I share something so private in such a public way? Because I am not the only one. Not by a long shot. We are all walking wounded, whether we have a similar story to tell or no. We live in a violent society. Violence against women is so commonplace as to be unnoticed. This is why so many of my acquaintances thought I should forgive my abuser, should go back to him, to preserve their worldview, to preserve their story, because my experience is not what is valuable. My life is not what is important, and my anger threatens their worldview. I don't care. Not everyone can tell their story. Not everyone can share their pain for various reasons. Some women still live with their abusers. Some women are not safe. Some women are being killed softly, drip by excruciating drip. Some women don't know they are being abused because, like the goldfish who doesn't recognize it's swimming in water, abuse is everywhere, all around her. It is normal. Some women recognize their abuse, but have no way of escaping. And many of us, if not all of us, are wounded by society. We live in a misogynistic, abusive culture, and we can't necessarily escape internalized misogyny. How many women told me I was overreacting in their words or their deeds? Too many. How many women have been made uncomfortable and scared by my anger and my reactions? Too many. How many women wish I would have just kept my mouth shut and remained the happy housewife? Too many. I argue that we are at war. Women are constantly subjected to consistent abusive tactics, whether it is the slightly more subtle forms of the pornification and hypersexualization of women in general, the barrage of targeted physical and verbal abuse in public, or the abuse that happens in private, behind the closed doors of their own homes. According to Women's Aid, one study of 96 cases of domestic abuse recorded by the police found that men are significantly more likely to be repeat perpetrators and significantly more likely than women to use physical violence, threats, and harassment. In a 6-year tracking period, the majority of recorded male perpetrators, 83%, had at least 2 incidents of recorded abuse, with many having a lot more than 2, and one man having 52 repeat incidents. The study also found that men's violence tended to create a context of fear and control, which was not the case when women were perpetrators. Women are targeted across the world just for being female. Female genital mutilation, child sexual exploitation and abuse, trafficking, child marriage, domestic violence, rape, coercion, the cotton ceiling, the list is much, much longer than this. Entire economies depend upon and use violence against women. According to a study entitled Trafficking Terror, How Modern Slavery and Sexual Violence Fund Terrorism, there are clear links terrorists, criminals, and traffickers. A summary of this report by UK Aid states, key findings include the plethora of benefits that modern slavery presents to terrorist groups by attracting, retaining, mobilizing, and rewarding fighters, and the clear links between terrorists, criminals, and traffickers. While terrorists seem to commit sexual violence for ideological reasons, ransom payments and trafficking indicate that this may also be an important source of revenue. I again quote Andrea Dworkin from her essay, Freedom Now, Ending Violence Against Women. Women will never be free unless we are not any longer treated as objects, which includes sexual objects. We are human beings. We are the center of our own lives. We are not things for men to act out on. We will never be free unless we stop the notion that violence is okay. It's not okay. Nobody has a right to control another human being through violence. We cannot continue to sanction violence as a way of life for both victim and executioner. Women are not ever going to be free unless all the institutions that support hurting women end, including the use of pornography by men, such that the hurting of women becomes a form of sexual entertainment, including the exploitation of women in prostitution, such that men have a right to lease women's bodies for sexual release whenever they want. We have to deal with the sexualization of children in our society. As women have rebelled and aspired, however much we think we failed, to some kind of social equality, men have looked for sex objects who will fit a sexual paradigm based on inequality. The question is, can men have sex with equals? The answer may well be no. If the answer is no, the men have to change, or we have to give up equality. I think we should decide not to give up equality. Another thing that has to change is that all the people who can't hear the screams have got to start being able to hear them. Those who can't see the bruises on women standing in front of them have to be able to see them. They also have to have something they can do about it, and somewhere they can go when they hear, when they see. End quote. 87 days ago, I didn't fully understand that one woman's pain and suffering is all women's pain and suffering. We are all walking wounded in this war on women. You, my sisters, share my pain. I share yours. We stand together, bruised and bleeding, sometimes feeling strong, sometimes feeling weak, but we stand together. And we fight. We fight for ourselves, we fight for our children, we fight for each other. 87 days ago, this pain was an abstract concept to me. I did not recognize that I was already a part of it, that my life was already influenced by the suffering of women everywhere. With the strike of my abuser's hand, something inside me woke up. Something inside of me became strong. The theoretical was transformed into the practical, and I changed. What is my elephant in the room? It is the acknowledgement of this shared trauma. It is the awareness of this common pain. We are the walking wounded, all of us. Regardless of our personal histories, regardless of the specifics, we share this trauma together and we will respond differently. That is our right. It is our human sovereignty. We have differences of opinion. We each see the world through a unique lens, and this is good. Our differences are our strengths, not our weaknesses. Audre Lorde eloquently states this fact in her essay, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. For women, the need and desire to nurture each other is not pathological, but redemptive. And it is within that knowledge that our real power is rediscovered. It is this real connection which is so feared by a patriarchal world. Only within a patriarchal structure is maternity the only social power open to women. Interdependency between women is the way to a freedom which allows the I to be, not in order to be used, but in order to be creative. This is a difference between the passive be and the active being. Advocating the mere tolerance of difference between women is the grossest reformism. It is a total denial of the creative function of difference in our lives. Difference must not merely be tolerated, but seen as a fund of necessary polarities between which our creativity spark like a dialectic. And I paused this quotation to admit I had to look up what dialectic meant, which means discussion and reasoning by dialogue as a method of intellectual investigation, which is exactly what's happening here today. Continuing on to Lord's words, as women, we have been taught either to ignore our differences or to view them as causes for separation and suspicion rather than as forces for change. Without community, there is no liberation, only the most vulnerable and temporary armistice between an individual and her oppression. But community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. End quote. It took a traumatic life event to show me that my differences to my fellow women, the cultural underpinnings of my psyche, my religious upbringing, the experiences that shaped my whole self, serve as a strength in my relationships with other women. Who I am, what I present to the world, my uniqueness, brings strength to the whole. All of us in this room, all of you watching live stream, or perhaps some point in the future, you are my strength, and I am yours. We are in this together. In each battle in this war, we stand together, and we uplift each other through our differences. We are not hive mind, no, and that is our strength. This womanly dialectic, this female-centered discussion and reasoning by dialogue as a method of intellectual investigation creates power. It creates change. It motivates us, it unites us, it binds us together. 86 days ago, my story changed. I don't have the full picture yet. I don't have all the words to describe my new story, but I know this. It includes you. It includes all women everywhere, and in spite of the challenges I face, in spite of my and my children's trauma, I stand up. I stand up for myself, I stand up for my sisters, I stand up for women everywhere, and I feel privileged in doing so. You don't have to like me. We don't have to be best friends. That's okay. I will continue to fight against the oppression of women everywhere because this is my story. This is who I am. This is who we all are.